So welcome everyone. I think we need to start the webinar so we can have time to go through all this incredible knowledge that we have gathered through our enormously distinguished panelists today. So let me just start introducing myself. My name is Dr. Annika Steiber. I'm representing a new center where we aim to develop the new management curriculum for the digital age. And this was based on a frustration where we found that business schools and also consultancy companies and of course corporations themselves didn't have the tool sets or maybe even the knowledge about how management is changing. And that is including everything from organizational theory, leadership, HR, and marketing, everything that you can put into the umbrella of management of a firm or an organization. So we started the center up 1.5 years ago, approximately in 2020, and have so far been very blessed to be able to offer a number of courses and also free webinars like this to just disseminate the knowledge and build an increasing community of people that share the same purpose as we do. And with me today, I have an absolutely fantastic panel. Let's start with John Hagel, the star of today. And you that know John Hagel, I assume that many of you just called in today because of John Hagel. He has 40 years of experience, and he was the founder. He was also a director. No, you were a partner of McKinsey as well, but you were the founder of Center of Edge at Deloitte. And what I think he's most known for is his work with the World Economic Forum and also the Global Peter Drucker Forum, where he acted as an expert and advisor to both of those very influential organizations. And if you don't know about the Peter Drucker Forum, it's maybe the world leading forum for leadership and for the development of leadership knowledge in that field. Then we have Adrian. Adrian is from Google. He's a technical director from the office of CTO. And today he represents also the Google model, which I wrote about and published already in 2014. And I'm still amazed over what Google is doing and how they are running the company in 180-degree different from most other companies. So if you don't know about Google, then you have a chance to ask questions and learn today. We have Antonio, the Chief Communication Officer from GE Appliances, not only a fantastic expert on now, not only on communication, but also on transformation of a company. And I had the blessing to follow GE Appliances now for almost 1.5 years, almost 2 years soon. And it's amazing what that company have been doing. Antonio will also represent an American version of the model called Rendanheyi, which is a similar model to the Google model, but is in some way also maybe even more disruptive. So if you're interested in that model and GE Appliances, Antonio will be able to answer questions and also let you know a little bit about that. And then, not least, we have Faye Anderson. Faye Anderson is doing what maybe all of us would love to do. She's the director and for strategy and learning at Global Communities. Global Community is an international NGO that develops solutions and humanitarian programs in 35 countries all around the world. And she has also 20 years of experience of teaching and consulting across academic and public sector. And Faye, you are going to come in later in this webinar and share your story with us. So thank you for being here. I also have Isaac with me. Isaac is working with me in the center. I think he will be not on video most of the time, but welcome Isaac as well. So we are living in a very different world today than what we did only maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I think most of us on this webinar today remember how it was 20 years ago. The world today is very different, and some would, label it the VUCA world. It's very volatile, it's very ambiguous, it's very uncertain, it's very, very complex. And for leaders, this is tremendously challenging. There are, in one way, exponential opportunities, but on the other hand of the coin, or other side of the coin, it's tremendous stress. And this pressure and stress and uncertainty is also making it so much easier for companies to become even more path dependent and inertia, to keep on to what they have today and not be able to catch all those opportunities that are out there. John Hagel had been thinking about this a lot for many, many years, and also developed an absolutely unique tool set, how leaders can manage those challenges and be able to strive in this uncertain, very complex world. So with that, I would love to start to introduce John Hagel up on stage, where you will provide some context about what you call the big shift, and also this more or less new paradigm for leaders, and some tool set that can help them in this complex world.
Okay, I'll take the stage here. So I am going to focus on a major challenge that I believe is confronting leaders of all large institutions around the world. And when I talk about institutions, I'm not just talking about companies. I'm talking about governments, universities, NGOs, any large institution around the world. Although I will focus in my comments today on companies, but remember that I'm addressing a broader challenge for all institutions. And the challenge basically is that the traditional approaches to leadership that led to great success in the past are becoming less and less effective in a rapidly changing world. So the successful leaders of the future are going to have to adopt a fundamentally different approach to create value. And that is challenging. And I'll start by setting context. As Annika mentioned, I've spent decades now doing research on the long-term forces that are reshaping the global economy and society. And I've come to believe that we're in the early stages, still relatively early, even though it's been playing out for decades, early stages of what Annika mentioned was the big shift that is transforming the global economy and society. And it has many different impacts or implications. One is that it is creating mounting performance pressure on all of us. And the pressure takes many different forms. It can be intensifying competition on a global scale. It's the accelerating pace of change. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And then, as if that weren't enough, because of all the connectivity we've created around the world, some small event in a faraway place cascades into an extreme disruptive event, leaves us scrambling to figure out what to do. There I mentioned pandemic as just one example of those extreme disruptive events. So that's a lot of pressure, but those are also a lot of words. I've actually, again, through my research, tried to quantify some of this pressure. I focused in the US economy. I asked, how have public companies done with all this amazing digital technology that's now available to us? How have companies done in terms of performance? And I went back to 1965, a few years before digital technology really came into the business world, until today. And I took as the measure of performance return on assets for all public companies, not just a sample, but every company listed on a public exchange in the US. So with all this incredible technology, what's happened to performance? Well, over that time period from 1965 until today, return on assets has collapsed. It's gone down by 75%. So Not only a lot of pressure, but increasing inability to deal with the pressure, deteriorating performance. And the performance is even more severe in the sense of another effort that I did to quantify this was I looked at the average lifespan of a company in the United States, a public company on the S&P 500, the top list of companies in the US. How long, once they get to that list, how long do they stay on the list? Well, from 1937, at the height of the Depression, talk about challenging times, until today, the average lifespan of a company on the S&P 500 has gone down by 80%. They're dying at a faster and faster rate. It's not just that they are deteriorating in terms of performance, they're actually going out of business or being acquired by somebody else. So that's, I think, a pretty good indicator, not only that we're facing a lot of pressure, mounting pressure, but also that the performance is deteriorating as a result. So the result is, again, Annika briefly mentioned, I believe is fear is increasingly dominating the leadership groups of large institutions. And it's understandable. And with all this kind of pressure, it's quite understandable to be afraid. But on the other side, fear is also a very limiting emotion. And so it tends to shrink our time horizons. We tend to just focus on today. We tend to just become much more risk averse. We become less trusting of others. There are a lot of limiting factors in fear, and you get a vicious cycle going on. The more fear we feel, the more pressure we're experiencing, the more fear it generates, and it cascades quickly into a very difficult situation. And I believe that escaping that vicious cycle is going to require a fundamental transformation. And here I will just say that I challenge, I know every large institution, at least I've talked to today, has a digital transformation program. Fine. When you actually explore what that program is, it's how do we apply digital technology so that we can do everything faster and cheaper. Doing the same thing, just faster and cheaper. I'm sorry, I don't believe that's transformation. It may be helpful in the short term under pressure, but please don't call it transformation. Transformation is the caterpillar to the butterfly. If you can't recognize the result, then you've transformed. If you're just making the caterpillar walk faster, again, not transformation. So I'm talking about transformation, creating something that's unrecognizable from what we have today. And in that context, I'll just say that I believe all our institutions for the past century have operated on an institutional model that I call scalable efficiency. It's all about how do we do things faster and cheaper at scale. And it's hard to argue, again, for a century, huge, successful, large institutions around the world have been created with this scalable efficiency model. The challenge is that the approach to scalable efficiency is becoming less and less efficient in this rapidly changing world. And what we're going to need to do is create new institutional models that I describe as scalable learning, where the focus of the institution is how to help everyone in the organization learn faster and achieve more impact and deliver more value. Everyone, not just the research centers, not just the innovation centers, everyone in the organization. And I hasten to say, when I talk about learning here, I'm not talking about learning in the form of sharing existing knowledge in training programs. I'm talking about learning in the form of creating entirely new knowledge, knowledge that did not exist before, and that will create and deliver more value to the stakeholders. That's what's required in a rapidly changing world. And I believe it's going to, again, be very challenging to make that transition. Everything needs to be challenged in the organization if we're serious about scalable learning. And I'll just say one of the areas that needs to change is how are we defining work? Work today in large institutions are tightly specified tasks that are highly standardized across the organization so they can be done in the same efficient way everywhere in the organization, and tightly integrated tasks. Well, guess what? Those tasks are what machines can do much better than human beings. And in a rapidly changing world, we need to focus the people on addressing unseen problems and opportunities to create more value wherever they are in the organization, seeing those opportunities and addressing them to deliver more and more value, and learning in the process as to what's required to deliver value. So again, I think fundamental shift, everything needs to be challenged and changed, and it requires a very different leadership approach. And I'm just going to quickly go through some of the leadership approaches. I don't have time to drill into any of them, but on strategy, I believe that this approach to strategy that most traditional institutions pursue is the 5-year plan. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. That's our strategy. I've become a strong proponent looking at some of the most successful technology companies and working with them in this, of an alternative approach to strategy that I call zoom out, zoom in. And in that strategy, the focus is on 2 time horizons. 10 to 20 years, that's the zoom out. Question is, what's our future going to look like 10 to 20 years from now? And what are the biggest opportunities that we could be addressing in that future? The other horizon, 6 to 12 months. And on that horizon, the zoom in side, the questions are, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, that we could be pursuing in the next 6 to 12 months? And do we have a critical mass of resources against those 2 to 3 initiatives? But 6 to 12 months, 10 to 20 years. The companies doing this spend very little, if any, time on 1 to 5 years. It's all about those 2 horizons. Their belief is if they get that right, they will succeed. Rethinking strategy in terms of growth strategy. More and more institutions are under pressure for growth from investors. And when I sit in growth strategy meetings, the choices are make or buy. You know, how much are we going to do internally through internal growth, and how much are we going to do through acquisition? I believe there's a third approach to growth that is not on the agenda, but needs to be for the leadership, which is what I call leverage growth, which is how do we create and deliver more and more value to the stakeholders by mobilizing a growing number of third parties to provide that value. And we take a piece of the action as an orchestrator of all of that. Untapped opportunity there. And then I group it in strategy, but it's a focus in my recent book on this notion of corporate narratives. And I think that, again, an untapped opportunity to build much deeper trust with customers and stakeholders by crafting narratives that focus on the customers, not on the company. It's not a narrative about the company. It's a narrative, it's an opportunity that the customers have out in the future. And it's a call to action to them in terms of how to address that opportunity. Huge value can be created, much deeper loyalty and trust. Very few, if any, companies today have what I would describe as a corporate narrative. So that's some of the changes in strategy for leadership. Changes in organization. I believe that we're going to have to, again, have a big shift from top-down hierarchical command and control organizations to modular organizations that are organized around what I call impact groups. But typically, they're anywhere between 3 to 15 people who are focused on acting together and learning together and having more and more impact together, again, in whatever context they're operating in. And then connecting those impact groups into broader networks. And by the way, networks that extend far beyond the single institution. It's a question of how do we connect more effectively with a larger number of third parties where we can all learn faster together. and not just focus on short-term transactions with external third parties. It's how do we build deep trust-based relationships where we can all learn together and achieve more impact and value that's meaningful. So, very different kind of organization that we're going to have. In terms of people management, I'll just quickly go into one area there. Most companies that I know today focus on worker engagement. That's the key metric of success. We have engaged workers. And broadly, what they mean is, do the workers like the work they do? Do they like the people they work with? And do they respect the company they work for? Not to dismiss engagement, but it is not sufficient. What we need are workers who have deep passion about their work, who are driven and excited about the opportunity to change and learn in the process. And that's a very different kind of emotion and mindset. Most companies aren't even measuring it, much less trying to encourage it. And I would say most institutions today, large institutions, are actually trying to crush that passion. Yet passionate people ask too many questions. They deviate from the script. They take too many risks. Why would we want those passionate people? We want engaged workers who like the work they're being assigned. Let them do their assigned tasks. So anyway, people management changes at a profound level. Operations, got to cover everything here. It's just, again, we're changing everything in the way companies operate. Operations for the past several decades, the whole buzzword has been business process reengineering. How can we re-engineer our business processes to make them more tightly integrated and more efficient, end to end? I believe increasingly what we're going to have to focus on is what I call business practice redesign, which is rather than processes, it's about looking at the practices within those small groups that I mentioned, the impact groups, and what are the practices that will help people to learn faster and achieve more impact together, and cultivating and fostering those practices. And then leadership itself has to change at a fundamental level. I mean, again, I'm going to be high level here, but I think that the mark of a strong leader today in large institutions is someone who has an answer to all the questions. No matter what the question is, you can count on the leader to have an answer to it. By the way, if they don't, maybe it's time to get rid of them and get somebody who does. I believe in this big shift world that we're facing, the mark of a strong leader is the one who has the most powerful questions and who will freely admit they don't have an answer and ask for help. And it sends an important message to the organization that not only are questions okay, the questions are necessary to learn and create more value. And it's not only okay, but necessary to ask for help. Don't just sit there trying to do it all yourself. Reach out and connect so that you can get more help and reach better answers faster. So very different approach to leadership. And I think that's something that, at least in my experience, most leaders have a hard time understanding, much less embracing. It's very culturally contrary to what strong leaders ought to be doing today. So I think the transformation is very challenging. Again, I've just gone through at a very high level some of the implications of the changes that are going to be required to deal with the big shift world. And I don't want to in any way suggest this is easy. It's going to be very challenging. And it's just a very high level view of some of the changes that are going to be required. But I think what's interesting is if we make this journey and address the transformation that's required, we have an opportunity to shift. I mentioned at the beginning that the big shift world is creating mounting performance pressure on all of us. Well, the interesting thing is that, and paradox, is that at the same time, those same long-term forces are creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have been imaginable a few decades ago. But the challenge is, if we're driven by fear, we can't even see the opportunity, much less have the motivation to pursue them. We're just consumed by the pressure. So I think we need to find ways to drive the transformation so that we can not only see the opportunities, but address them and unleash that exponentially expanding opportunity. But I'll just finish by saying that I don't think this is just an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity, but it's also an imperative. The institutions that choose not to do this, that choose to hold on to what they've done in the past and what has led to success in the past, are going to be increasingly marginalized and ultimately drop out. So it's an imperative. We all need to do this if we're going to continue to succeed in a big shift world. So with that, let me turn it back to Annika.
Thank you, John. And in fact, we already see this deterioration of value of companies that sort of stay still. If you look at the Standard & Poor's 500 list, for example, where they clearly now start to state out companies that become digital sort of fit companies for this economy. Two companies that stands out in the world, and I've been doing research on the same topic as John now for 3 decades, almost 30 years. I cannot even believe it. But two companies that stands out. One was born with this mentality and this kind of new model, and that was Google. And we have him here tonight, I would say, but today, Adrian Otto, that will come next and share some thoughts with us. And the other one is Haier and GE Appliances, which both are following a new philosophy called Rendanheyi. Both are absolutely unique samples on companies that are doing exactly what John Hagel is talking about. So it is possible. And Antonio will share some of his knowledge and lesson learned after Adrian. And the interesting case with you was that you actually did this in less than 5 years. So it's possible to do pretty quickly if you just decide to do it and you believe that you have to move on, right? But why don't we start with Adrian and Google?
Thanks, Dr. Steiber. So many things. I love listening to John. I've been working together with you for maybe a year now, and when I hear this philosophy, there are so many parallels that I see every day in what we do, and I have an example for every single thing that you've said about how, from Google's philosophy perspective, how we're embodying these principles. But I think it's important to kind of point out that it's a balance between organizational design and the culture that you build through your leadership. And those things in combination allow for the response to this way of leading and this way of operating a company or an institution. So I think it all starts with values when you talk about culture. Google has 3 core values. Number 1 is respect the user. Number 2 is respect the opportunity. And number 3 is respect each other. And that kind of sets the stage for the culture in which an innovation phenomenon can occur. So in our innovation framework, it really boils down to 3 things. Number 1 is focus on the user. You'll notice a parallel here to the core values, right? So number 1 is focus on the user. And the reason for that is we believe if we focus on the needs of our users, our customers, and address their unmet needs, that everything else that's important to us will follow that. So all of the economic outcomes, all of the branding outcomes, everything that we care about as a company will fall in line if we're fundamentally meeting the deepest needs of our users. That's number one. Number two is about how we think about solving problems. We call this thinking 10x. So thinking 10x is a concept about not trying to solve incremental improvements on something that you do today, but rather thinking about a completely new way of solving a problem that's totally different, that's way better. And the reason we think this is so important to keep in mind as a mindset is because if you always spend that energy, that level of effort to raise yourself, that incremental bit, let's just call that a 10% boost, that has about the same level of effort that the right idea can have to get to that 10x solution. So are you applying your attention and your resources where you're going to have the highest impact? So that's the thinking 10x part of it. And then the third thing has to do with what John was talking about with learning. So the third pillar of our innovation strategy is rapid prototyping. Rapid prototyping is about, some people might characterize it as fake it till you make it. It's you try something really, really simple, the simplest possible thing that you can use to test a fundamental question about a problem. And you just get far enough to do that. And once you learn the answer, right, once you've tested something and have learned something useful, you then turn that learning into something, you come back with a revision, and then you try something new. And you go little by this, changing and learning as you go in a way that you don't regret any failure or any departure from what you expected, because you're only taking risk in limited scopes. So I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So that's the innovation strategy. So we've got the values, we've got the innovation strategy. We've also got a way that we've organized the company, right? The organizational design of Alphabet. So Google is a brand name. Alphabet is the name of the company, the holding company that owns all of the different pursuits, right? Google is the most famous one. Google has acquired over 200 other companies and brands. Among them are, YouTube and so many of these things that you'll recognize as household brands or everyday brands. But then we also have this concept of a bet, right? So Alphabet is kind of a pun. What we call another bet is a company with its own unique mission statement and its own leadership and resourcing to pursue a different mission. So Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And every single bet company has their own unique mission and resourcing in order to pursue those things. So we're organized in this way of a bunch of individual companies that are not encumbered by common strategy, right? They're all emergent in their respective silos, but then they all share scalable business functions like legal and HR and finance and so forth, right? So those things that are hard about operating the company are commonly provided as a shared service, and then things that are unique to the products and services and the pursuit of the mission of that company or that bet are individualized. So I'd also say that in the change of leadership style that John was talking about, I see leadership as kind of a balance, right? It's a balance of top-down, kind of instructive command style leadership, where you have a leader who has a vision, who conveys that, and then people work in order to align with that vision. And then there's bottom up, and bottom up is where you just allow your talent to be creative and come up with new innovative solutions that address users' needs. Okay, and so there's a balance. Every company has its own equilibrium between these things. And Google tends to try to focus much more on the bottom-up approach than the top-down approach, right? So just the minimum amount of top-down that you have, and as much bottom-up as you can possibly afford. So I know that Antonio, you have a similar mindset, but a different implementation of it. Why don't you tell us how you do it.
Thank you, Adrian. And it is so cool to be here because we are talking similar things, but we are using different language, and but we ended up landing in the same place. My name is Antonio Boadas, and I lead communications and transformation for GE Appliances. It's a company that is not as popular as Google is, but I'm sure you have something that we have built or sold in your house. So we build appliances, and thanks to us, you might cook, you might reheat, or you might preserve your food, or we keep your clothes very clean. We were born like 100 years ago. And we were perfect for the times when we were founded, but we became dated. Time went by, and we became something else. We became a little bit of an irrelevant company until things changed. And this is what John Hagel is teaching us: the big shift, or we were shaped by others and by the market, and therefore we ended up being acquired by Haier, by a very fine international global company based in China. But we learned something. We learned that we wanted to change. And our whole story was, I want to change. It's my whole story every January. I want to lose weight. I want to do it. How? Well, actually, there are many barriers and many reasons why it is so hard to lose weight in January, or to change your business model, or to transform and shift into something different. And reflecting for this conversation and the program that the Rendanheyi Center is offering, I thought of like two sets of visible and invisible enemies. The first set of visible enemies that we have, not to lose weight, but to change our companies, is bureaucracy. Living in such a bureaucratic organization, which means that there's many layers for decision making, that you are far removed from leaders, that everything needs to go through 7 layers of hell to get approved. That is a visible enemy of any transformation, anything that helps you to see the change you want to live in. The second one are the policy books. There are policies about even the way we need to dress to come to the office. Even the size of our offices. So when you have such a regulated environment, you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as somebody else wanted you to see it. And I remember seeing a policy of the size of the cubicles based on your level. So it's bureaucracy, it is policies, and it's stupidity at the end of the story. And the last one is playbooks. Yeah, we all love playbooks because this is the easiest way to get things, I guess, right according to history. Playbooks are based on best practices from the past. Whatever worked 5 years ago might not work today. And John will remind us all the time. The big shift is creating immense pressure in the business, immense pressure in the world. Trying to repeat the successful practices from the past might not equate to a successful result in the future. These are highly visible enemies that we need to deal with, and we dealt with before our transformation. And we have a group of invisible enemies that we all live with them all the time. And then John talked about one of them: fear of failure, fear of trying, fear of getting it wrong, fear of your boss, which you believe is your boss, which is someone in a higher level, but actually your real boss is whomever buys or use your product. But anyway, so you don't have that clarity yet because you haven't been able to transform, in my case, to lose weight. The second one is complacency, because things have gone so kind of well for so many years, you're kind of fine. It doesn't matter if you grow or you don't grow. As long as you keep your job, you're okay. And your business will remain in business. Yes, it is okay until they listen and read what John Hagel has to say. Like 80% of the companies will disappear in the next few years because we don't know how to change ourselves, and that we don't see the change we want to see. And the last one is something that's still happening in our companies. In our company, we're not perfect yet either. Are the gossips. When people feel that they need to go to the water cooler to talk about what is going on in the company, you have an issue. you have a transparency issue. You have an organization that feels that they can't talk openly about what is going on. So you got a set of enemies that are preventing you from seeing the world and to seeing the opportunity for transformation. So what we did? Powered by the Rendanheyi philosophy, which is the most human managerial philosophy ever, where basically what it means is the value you create and the value that your consumer and user is expecting becomes one, and that there is no distance in between these two elements of what you create and what people consume. It's helped us to really understand the future and helped us to understand where we were heading to. Rendanheyi is a Chinese word. It's a combination of 2 or 3 words. But in any case, for the purpose of this conversation, it is about consumer and the companies become one, and we create value for each other. So a few things that we have done over this transformation. One is we did something that we learned also from John Hagel. That's why I believe this is the best investment I ever made, and you guys will ever make if you take this training. He talks about innovating from the edge, which is like a very calculated risk of getting rid of bureaucracy, getting rid of policy books and playbooks, and just creating something that is not in the core of the business, isn't the edge of your business. We did that, and we created something that is called First Build, which is one of the most innovative ways of doing R&D, open source R&D with the community, helping us on developing what they want, not what we want to sell them. That's one thing that helped us on this one. The second one is, and to me it's a lesson, and I want to share this with you guys, is rethinking and reframing your corporate narrative and defining a leading goal. When you start seeing the world differently, and you can read this in one of John Hagel's books, but when you see the world, redefine your role in life, then you open up new opportunities, and you will start being so selfish, because back in the days when our company was founded 100 years ago, was pretty much everything about ourselves. We want to change the world because we want to see a different world, instead of what is what we need to do and we can do together. What is the service that I can provide and the value I can offer you for us together change the world? So it's a different way of seeing reality and seeing opportunities. And defining a leading goal, it's something that sounds very basic. It's like, yeah, you have to have a goal. But the philosophy is slightly different. And we learned this from Haier in the Rendanheyi philosophy. We tend to define goals and to pursue goals that are actually really reachable. Right there. In my case, I want to lose 5 pounds because I know I can lose 10, but I'm pretty lazy. I'll try to lose 5. And this is my leading goal. Actually, the leading goal is try to get to a place you cannot imagine that you could have even been there. It's just going and stretching yourself to a place that you have never thought about. 5 years ago, we declared that we wanted to be the #1 appliance company in America. And we call it the leading company because we wanted to be and be perceived as a leading company. 5 years ago, we were #4, whatever. We're totally relevant as a company in the list. We have doubled the business in 4 years, and we are there. We are not there yet because we are short by few dollars. And let's be honest, in March, we'll be there. But it's not about just the metric per se. It is the vibe, the culture, what Adrian was talking about, that energy that help people, just like we share values and we share this goal, we share that energy. So again, rethinking and reframing the corporate narrative and defining a real leading goal will help you to see the world as you wanted to see it. And that this will help you removing all the visible and invisible barriers. And the last one is where we're heading to as a company. We are redefining how we acquire or develop capabilities. And again, going back to John Hagel, it's a scalable learning, it's leveraging growth in a different way. It's the whole ecosystem approach. Instead of trying to create and owning everything we do, it's about opening the company to opportunities and inviting others to share value and to create something new. And not only inviting others, it is us joining others. That brings new levels of transparency, but also from the leadership point of view, it's a different level of vulnerability because you don't know everything you pretend you know. You have more questions than answers, and what John was saying brilliantly. It is about asking the right questions, and but you're not defining what's right or wrong. It's just the answer that you will get from different parties, which will make your questions right. It is an amazing process when you're able to transform a 100-year company into something that is, I wouldn't call it a startup because we're not a startup, but a company that is growing, that believes in itself, and is offering opportunities for others to grow together. We're now pursuing the idea, and our new leading goal is becoming the #1 appliance ecosystem company in the US. Do we know what it means? No. That's the beauty of this leading goal. We're co-creating this leading goal and the ways of getting to that goal with the whole organization and some of the partners that we're inviting to be part of this big dream. We want to be an ecosystem company. We'll see, and we'll talk in 4 or 5 more years, and we'll tell you how this looks like. We don't know that yet, but we are asking questions right now. That's what I wanted to share with you today, and I'm looking forward to joining this panel and this group in the next few months when we have and run this fantastic program with Annika and the Rendanheyi Center.
So I'm so impressed every time I hear both Adrian and Antonio, and of course John Hagel. It just blows my mind. And the interesting thing is that we already have samples. We already have, John Hagel has a toolbox. He has the thoughts. He has the toolbox. And now we have corporate examples, exactly how you can actually, copy and paste and learn how to do it. So with that, I would like to turn over to the next point on the agenda. Faye Anderson is here from Global Communities, representing an organization which sort of, make me feel I want to get hired immediately by you and start working with things that really matter. So you took the course with John Hagel half a year ago or so. So what was the background? Why did you become interested in this course? Because I would say, before I let you in, I want to say that we try to sort of package in a very, very short format, only 12 hours, everything we know on this specific topic and other topics, and make it, easily accessible by doing virtual, and also hopefully okay financially by having a pretty low price, because we want to disseminate the knowledge. We are not here to earn a lot of money. We want to disseminate the knowledge. We want to create an increasing community of people that really get it and can start working and transforming. So back to you again, Faye. What made you interested to sign up for this course, and what do you think you learned and got as a takeaway from the course?
Sure, it's great to be here. And I have to say that listening to John, to Adrian, and to Antonio just brings back such nice memories from the course and everything we did as a learning community last September. I can share with you that working at an international NGO, we're a ways probably from Google and from GEA, being in the nonprofit sector, but we are facing tremendous disruptions, not only in the global challenges that we face, but also in how we need to redefine work. And really, as a sector, we've been slow to do that. So I was searching. I had been named the head of strategy and learning for an NGO that has 4,000 employees around the world. We have to reinvent what we're doing and how we're doing it. They had just created a new strategic plan, and it was already, you could see the challenges it would face when it hits the organization. So I was searching for new ideas about leadership. And let me tell you, I have been in leadership development almost my entire career. So I have developed many leadership programs for just about half the federal agencies of the US government, and have done it in executive programs at universities as well. And really, in my mind, those types of approaches can be very useful, but they weren't cutting it when it came to the business challenges that we were facing as an organization right now, particularly with the pandemic hitting. And it just put change on the agenda right in front of every leader and every employee that we had. So I really was searching for something that was going to make a difference in what approaches we could bring to redesigning our organization, redesigning how we do the work, and really rethinking how the employees could be involved in their work and take more ownership of it. So it's really nice to be here and listen again to the course. And I can tell you, in terms of what I've taken out of it these last 6 months, it's really helped me to elevate my function that I lead at the organization and the people that I'm working with. But we all need opportunities to re-examine our thinking and our leadership practices. I would have to say that I left the course just so recommitted to the agency that you can gain as a leader by focusing in on the opportunities in front of you and loosening that grip that fear has in all of the rooms, whether they're Zoom or physical rooms that we're in as leaders. And we have to model this for others. So focusing in on the opportunity mindset was just a takeaway I didn't even know I would get from the course. But two things that I've used since then, if I can just share those with the group really quickly, is that the aspect of crafting institutional narratives has been critical for us. And we've started an initiative just of a group of passionate explorers thinking about narratives at all levels of our organization and our work. And with that strategic plan that we're trying to recraft in light of some of these things that John is constantly putting in front of us in the course, we're looking at unleashing some impact groups around 4 critical strategic priorities that we have as an organization. And yes, John, one of them is digital transformation from that strategic plan. But we're looking for those next best steps and approaches that will help us as an organization, as a nonprofit working internationally, to take us forward into a very changed world. So even though I come from the nonprofit sector, everything that John laid out in this course has just been so helpful for me to try to work with other leaders and help them elevate their mindsets around this needed change as well. So the case studies, and of course the interaction with the participants was just wonderful. And there was so much time built in to have Q&A with John. Having access to his mind and his thinking was just a true benefit from the class as well.
Thank you so much, Faye. And we have some time for some questions. I got a number of great questions here. The first one is to John. What are your thoughts on hierarchical leadership models that are driving this fear, which is essentially hurting and slowing down the very innovation we need? And this is from Gunjan Sol.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the big challenges is the leadership is actually playing to the fear. I mean, one of the things that I hear all the time is what I call the burning platform model of transformation. We're on a burning platform. It's going to collapse very soon. If we don't change, we're all going to die. Guess what that does? It plays to the fear. And when you're afraid, you're going to resist change. You're going to hold on to what you have. I don't want to die. I want to hold on to what I have. And so I think it becomes, again, this vicious cycle of increasing fear and increasing resistance to change, which is why the transformation efforts of large institutions, the academic studies all show an extremely high failure rate because they play to the threat and fear versus what's the really big opportunity to create exponentially more value than we could have ever provided before. That's a very different approach.
And we will go further into this in a month or so as well. We have two questions from Frank Kohlberg. I will start with the last one. Antonio, I heard you mention transparency. What are some concrete action you've taken to increase transparency? And then he also wonder, also to you, how do you help people find what they are passionate, excited about?
Yeah, on the first one, on transparency, we had, as many other companies, we had this annual leadership meeting where the selected 100 will go and define the future of the world. As John might say, it's the zoom out, but probably a very irrelevant zoom out. So we opened the doors to that meeting to this 14,000 employees we have in the company, all levels. So we kept exactly the same content. It is about planning the business results, where we're heading to, plans for the next 6 to 12 months. So that level of transparency wasn't seen before because there was a black box of planning and decision making that happened in that annual meeting. Now it's a collective collaboration, and we have workshop that became a highly engaging opportunity. So that's one thing. The other one, we have weekly videos and weekly engagement with the leadership and the CEO. People have access to them all the time. So these are very, very simple examples of how do you bring transparency. How do you connect passion and keep people passionate about the work? In the hiring process, it is not so important where you started versus what you do and you have done. So we want to make sure that you work on what you're passionate about. So I'm a communicator, and I happen to work in communication, but my passion is storytelling and transformation. I ended up working in transformation. So by connecting people to the real passion, you keep people really, I'm sorry, John, but engaged, happy, wanting to come every day to the office. And when you develop your own career, you develop your own career path. It's not HR who developed it for you. You developed it. You decide how this path looked like. And it might not look like what HR might have designed for you. And you decide what you want to learn and how you want to learn it and what is your destination role. So it's giving people freedom and treating people as people and not as parts of a big machine.
And with that, we unfortunately need to end because the time is out already. You can just imagine what you will learn during 4 hours times 3. So we will hopefully meet again, many of you, and it will be 4-hour slots 3 times over 3 weeks. So it's not too exhausting for us. It will be a lot of things we are learning. So hopefully we'll see you again. Otherwise, thank you for being part of this webinar today. We love you guys. Spread the word out there. We need to be more. We need to build this community of people that actually knows what's going on and what is needed in the future. Thank you, all panelists. Thank you, John. Thank you, Faye, for being here. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Antonio. And thank you, Isaac, for being here as well, as usual. I could not have done my job without my absolutely great people working with me in my center. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the week and weekend, and hope to see you soon.